Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our honourable speakers, officials, and to our virtual attendees. We're so glad you can join us here today for It's Not Easy Being Green, Islands and Financing the Green Energy Transition. I'm Ben Bartle. I'm a project director for RMI's Climate Finance Access Network and the moderator for today's event. I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to Island Innovation and the team for hosting us for this event. And also for this week of really important and meaningful conversations. I hope you've been able to attend some of those earlier sessions. So COP26 really drove home the fact that the world's energy and climate future is increasingly hinging on decisions that are made in emerging markets and developing economies. And sustainable finance and infrastructure is playing a really critical role in accelerating the transition to a green energy and low carbon future. Today's panelists are going to highlight just that, the importance of direct, accessible finance, whether that be climate finance, blended and concessional finance, or commercial capital, and how that can help island nations accelerate the development of renewable energy sources and other green infrastructure to help islands not only survive, but to thrive in a warming world. As we know, island nations have contributed the least to rising global emissions, but are going to suffer disproportionately the impacts. So resiliency and adaptation are going to be key to navigate the energy transition for islands, but they're going to face challenges along the way. And while the volume of available funding has increased, the 100 billion promised in commitments to the developing world has not been delivered, and the international climate finance system has become increasingly burdensome. Complex funder requirements and project development processes alongside lengthy timeframes for project development and approvals create an access bottleneck, which has really slowed down the impact of urgently needed and available financial resources. We need to innovate, and I'm really excited to hear from our esteemed panelists and of course you today about just that. For a little context, one of the programs that I'm supporting, the Climate Finance Access Network, was developed as a direct response for islands to secure finance for climate investments. We're a global network designed to provide prompt and practical solutions to the climate finance bottlenecks that small island developing states, least developed countries, and African nations are facing. We work with countries themselves to identify the sort of support that they need to unlock to access the finance, and then we recruit and embed skilled climate finance advisors in the countries. Our current cohort of advisors is active now on 8 islands in the Pacific, and we're aiming to deploy cohorts in the Caribbean and Africa by the end of 2022 and in early 23. We'll be hearing from some fantastic island experts today. We have our keynote speaker, the Honourable Julie Thomas, the Chief Minister from St. Helena, Ms. Iham Talab, the Senior Advisor for Get Invest, the Head of the Department of Energy for Greenland, Mr. Rasmus Wendt, and Ms. Vimy Dokun, the Environmental Engineer and Island Innovation Ambassador from Mauritius. Now, we all know island nations possess abundant local and natural resources. We have wind, sun, and in some cases, geothermal and hydro potential in these countries, but they're necessary really to harness and provide low-cost, clean and affordable local energy. And we see high electricity costs and current volatile global oil prices, and a reliance really on imported diesel really creates the clear business case for distributed renewable energy sources. Incorporating these resilient and clean energy solutions into existing energy infrastructure not just only benefits utilities and governments and communities, but it's also necessary in our warming world. Our panel today will be discussing the challenges they face and the solutions they've unlocked in the renewable energy sector, and the lessons, of course, they've learned from financing the transition in island natures. We'll explore what really makes this work challenging, but we'll also look to our experts here today to discover what really works and the recommendations they have for scaling green finance. We'll start by hearing from our speakers and then turn over to questions from the audience. So in doing so, please put your questions in the Q&A box along with your name, as well as your organization that you're representing. And if your question is addressed to a specific person, please make sure your question, please make sure you jot that down. Also, please ensure that your question is addressed to all participants so everyone can see the questions that you've asked. We have a few, we do have the Honourable Julie Thomas with us here now. Fantastic to see you, Julie. Without further ado, will hand things over to you, and we look forward to the Q&A towards the end. So thanks so much, Minister. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm just checking, Sarah, have you got our slideshow to show as well?
Yes, we should have slides. Just a second.
Okay. Whilst you're doing that, I'm happy to continue if you so wish.
Yes, please go ahead and we'll share them for you.
Thank you. Okay, so greetings and a very warm welcome to all attending the significant session. It's not easy being green, islands and financing the green energy transition. Thank you once again to the Island Innovations team for hosting us, and more importantly, for identifying topics that are a focal point of most islands, as we strive to become models for larger countries to follow. I would also like to give a special mention to all the other speakers that will be joining me here today, which is Ilham Taleb, Senior Advisor of Get Invest, Resmond Wendt, Head of Department of Energy from the Government of Greenland, and Vimy Dukum, Environmental Engineer and Island Innovation Ambassador from Mauritius, who will also speak on this topic today. I look forward to hearing your contribution and hope that we can holistically explain the importance that green initiatives will have for our islands, and more importantly, highlight the need for attracting or establishing finances to enable us to initiate or expand upon efforts and plans currently being tabled to allow us to become more self-sustaining. To aid my presentation today, I have included a slideshow that depicts our greatest assets, our natural environment, and of course, our people. I do hope that you will find this presentation interesting and informative. Is the presentation now ready to go?
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. So St. Helena was discovered by the Portuguese in 1502 and settled by the British in 1659. St. Helena is one of the most remote islands on Earth, 1,200 miles from Southern Africa and 1,800 miles from Brazil. The nearest land is Ascension Island at 703 miles northwest. We have a population of under 4,500 people. Like most islands, we are almost entirely reliant on imports, including fuel for our energy use. Exports of primary and secondary products are difficult due to the high cost of transportation. In addition, a shrinking working age population is lowering our tax base, reducing the ability to access economies of scale in industry, causing brain drain and lowering overall economic productivity. As in most developing countries, an overall weak economic environment makes a rigorous climate change strategy difficult to put at the top of our political agenda. However, our natural environment is well regarded as one of our greatest assets and is something this government is extremely proud of and dedicated to protecting. Our location has enabled survival of St. Helena's endemic species, many still being discovered or rediscovered, and almost all of which are on the IUCN Red List. In past years, the island's endemics attracted visitors such as Charles Darwin, and as the climate crisis dominates the international spotlight, St. Helena's endemics are now recognized as globally important. At just 47 square miles, St. Helena is less than 1/3 of the size of the Isle of Wight. However, we house more than 30% of the biodiversity in the whole of the UK and the overseas territories. Our endemics are at a level near to that of the Galapagos, and we are sometimes referred to as the Galapagos of the South Atlantic. St. Helena and its sister islands have the highest percent of the threatened tree species in the world, at 69% of tree species threatened, according to the recent State of the World's Trees report. We boast incredible night sky viewing, protected in legislation. Bob Bauer, Fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society and member of the British Astronomical Association, visited in April 2018 and said, "The Milky Way is so good it can be mistaken for a cloud." St. Helena really does have an asset, because being close to the equator, we get to see 90% of the whole sky. Now I'll speak a little bit about our vision. St. Helena's climate change policy was adopted in 2019. The main aims of the policy are to reduce the quantity of greenhouse gas emissions created on our island by making better use of our natural resources, to reduce the risk to island life and sustainable development from weather-related hazards, and to ensure that at the heart of the economic development is the protection and enhancement of the island's natural and cultural heritage in order to maintain a good quality of life for residents now and in the future. My government was elected in October 2021, and we recently published our vision, which identified some of the key priorities we will be focusing on during our 4-year tenure. We are striving for a sustainable environment that creates opportunities and inspires social and economic progress, ensuring a better quality of life for all. At the heart of our vision, there are 3 main dimensions: our environment, our economy, and our social obligations. To enable us to achieve our vision, our priority policies will focus on specific areas, which are instrumental to addressing the current challenges impinging on our ability to create a more optimistic and viable future for our island. 2 specific priorities that encompasses our topic today are the development of our renewable energy and water security plans, which ensure that we primarily protect our environment whilst delivering both resources at affordable prices. Maintaining and improving our blue and green agenda, aspiring to become a blueprint for others to follow. St. Helena remains resolute in tackling the global challenge of climate change and is already preparing for the predicted environmental changes in order to mitigate its negative effects. A small isolated island status in the South Atlantic is of irrelevance, as we are already showing global leadership by transitioning towards becoming a sustainable island. Whilst we are almost entirely reliant on financial support from the UK government, and the distribution of this funding requires a high degree of prioritization across all economic, social, and environmental sectors, we have also established key strategic partnerships with third sector organizations. I hope this forum inspires us to think of new ways our governments can build relationships with the private and third sectors in order to achieve our goals and diversify our green investments. We are also looking at ways to diversify our economy in order to increase our own capacity to reinvest in our island and our people. The fiber optic cable recently landed, which we hope will go live next year, will be key to increasing government revenues through increasing our digital exports. St. Helena's total emissions of greenhouse gases and other air pollutants may be insignificant in global terms, but the measures needed to reduce these emissions are similar to other countries. Our emissions are best measured through consumption levels, that is, emissions generated on St. Helena, plus carbon emissions generated in the manufacture and transport of goods to and from St. Helena. There are still opportunities to achieve reductions that will have local environmental, health, and economic benefits. A net zero scoping study completed for St. Helena in early 2021 clearly identified energy, transport, food and farming, and consumption as the main areas of impact, and therefore these will be the key areas for St. Helena to target for reduction of carbon emissions. The small and isolated nature of our nation also means that it may be possible to achieve significant change in a short period of time, in line with our vision. Today, I will talk through progress within 3 areas of our climate and environmental management priorities. Revolutionizing sustainable planning and land use through improvement and adoption of GIS usage via the South Atlantic Environmental Research Institute, SARI, funded Move On project, improving our sustainable environment through the RSPB partnered project to restore St. Helena's cloud forests, and our attempts at achieving a market for 100% renewable energy, learning from the constant challenge to meet this endeavor. Move On is a project funded by the European Commission that aims to advance mapping and assessment of ecosystem services, methodology implementation in European outermost regions and overseas countries and territories. The project also intends to create and strengthen the scientific and technical mapping and assessment of ecosystem services community in those territories, tackling the bottom-up approach initiated in the MOVE project and demonstrating the benefits of ecosystems conditions, assessments, and their services to support decision-making. Move On is coordinated by the Regional Fund for Science and Technology from Regional Government of the Azores and integrates partners from France, the UK, Germany, and Italy. It complements and expands the activities of the MOVE project, strengthening links and capitalizing the ongoing work to further test and implement the MAES methodology in different regions, underpinned by 4 anchor projects in French Guiana, Micronesia, Reunion Island, and South Atlantic region. SARI Falkland Islands Limited, SFL, a subsidiary of the South Atlantic Environmental Research Institute, is leading on the delivery of the South Atlantic Anchor Project, which aims to make MAES outputs meaningfully available for policy and decision makers on the island of St. Helena. SFL also leads on scrutinizing the process and lessons learned from this anchor project in order to produce a set of guidelines on bridging the gap between policy and evidence on small islands and/or resource-limited entities. So far, the project has benefited St. Helena in that government's GIS function has been developed and used to support the work of a wide variety of departments, so that we as politicians have much wider access to evidence upon which to develop policies and make decisions relating to the use of our most significant scarce resource, our land. By using environmental data combined with the ease with which maps can be used to visualize the impacts of our decisions, we are better placed to understand where to build sustainable homes, where to locate renewable energy infrastructure, where to expand agricultural production, and where to establish other long-term investments, such as satellite ground stations, one of the key digital exports I referred to earlier. Mitigating the impacts, the restoration of our cloud forests through global partnerships. St. Helena has developed a flagship nature-based solution project to restore the threatened cloud forests of the Pigs National Park for water security and biodiversity needs. This is a 3-year partnership project which brings together SHG, the private sector, and a consortium of local and international NGOs. The St. Helena Cloud Forest Project is a highly collaborative multi-year project working to implement the Pigs Management Plan for St. Helena, Pigs National Park. This globally significant area holds over 1/6 of the UK's total endemic biodiversity, approximately 250 unique species, provides the majority of the island's fresh water through mist capture and groundwater recharge, and offers a unique wilderness experience in an area that has been voted one of St. Helena's 7 wonders. Over the next 5 years, Work will take place within the Peaks National Park under 3 main pillars: biodiversity, improving, restoring, and creating cloud forest habitat and conservation of associated species with the aim of safeguarding an internationally important wildlife hotspot from further extinctions. Water security and climate change, revegetating around native habitat fragments in key areas of mist capture, and monitoring and research to inform and secure the island's water security and climate change adaptation efforts. Socioeconomic, supporting the sustainable development of St. Helena by developing opportunities through ecotourism, education, sustainable land use, and conservation training. The highly threatened Peaks National Park is the single most important site on British soil from a species diversity and conservation perspective. The endemic cloud forest restoration increases the area over which mist is intercepted and filtered down into underground aquifers, enhancing an ecosystem service. A key objective of the Cloud Forest Management Plan includes creating an additional 12 hectares of cloud forest habitat over the next 10 years. This would increase the water supply on the island by up to a fifth and safeguard the habitat for 1/6 of all endemic British species, and the additional forest habitat and vegetation also has the capacity to be a significant carbon sink for increasing rates of sequestration. Funding of 900K for 21-22 has been provided by the UK government, with matched funding from project partners and under various Darwin Plus projects, taking the total funding up the value of 1.3 million for year 1. This project is being managed by the RSPB with local partners including St. Helena Government, the EMD Environmental Management Division, Sustainable Development, Education, St. Helena's Research Institute, St. Helena National Trust, Connect St. Helena, our Met Office, and international partners including Octium, UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, University of British Columbia, and British Geological Survey.
Sorry,
lastly,
Julie, I just need to let you know that we politely have to quickly wrap up and
Yes.
get the other speakers. And so if you could just finish up. Thanks.
I will do that. So it's not easy being green on St. Helena, but while the speech is focused on 2 projects, they are but a slice of the initiatives of our island is undertaking, which cannot be covered in a 15-minute talk. We are leading the way in climate governance, water resource management, forestry management, marine protection, and protection of our wider national conservation areas, climate change research, sustainable waste management, and agriculture. We have ambitions for improving the sustainability of our homes and buildings and our transportation systems. We are particularly keen to hear in the subsequent discussion of sources of climate finance that St. Helena could access to accelerate and extend in its adaptation and resilience measures to the growing impacts of climate change for the benefit of the island's community, both now and in the future, including especially for investments in renewable energy projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Firstly, thank you for showing us your beautiful island, and great really to hear about St. Helena's abundant natural resources, and also your climate vision, which I think really is amazing how it's aspiring to be a blueprint for other island nations to follow. So excellent work there. And now I'd like to welcome Ms. Iham Talab, Senior Advisor for Get Invest, to present. Please join us now with your camera. Thanks.
Wonderful.
Great to see you.
I hope you can hear me properly. Great. Thank you very much. A wonderful presentation about St. Helena. I will also definitely consider visiting. I have prepared a few slides as well. I don't know if we can start them already, or I can share my screen as well.
If you could share them on your side, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Let me try to do that quickly. share, and I hope it works.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Great. So you can see some slides.
Yeah, we can see.
Great. Excellent. I'm going to keep this presentation short and open for questions afterwards, but good evening and good morning, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. My name is Ilham Talab. I'm a senior advisor with Get Invest, and really pleased to be here with all of you to share with you a little bit of what we have been up to and how can we help really build sustainable and affordable energy projects in the context of island states. Now, just to give you a brief idea for those that don't know much about us, although I see a lot of familiar names in the attendees list, Get Invest, we are a European program. Our main objective is to support investments in clean energy space in sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. And we really focus on solving one single problem. And that problem is the disconnect between the projects and the financiers. So those that need the money and those that provide the money. And you've all have, I think the moderator and also the previous speaker has alluded to this. Now, of course, not so many projects or not all the projects need such support, but some do. And so we try to help them to build better projects to access finance. And that could be anything from equity to debt and also grants. This work that we do is possible because of the support that we receive from the European Union, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Austria. And primarily, we do this through a facility that we call the Finance Catalyst. It's our facility that provides one-to-one direct advisory services, financial advisory services to the project developers and companies to allow them to access, to help them to access finance. And how you do this, I'm going to get into it in a minute, but basically it's a very simple online application process. I promise it's quite straightforward. This is the link over here if you'd like to explore more, but I would like to ask you to stay with me on this presentation because I have one more slide or two, and then I promise it's going to end. So how do we contribute to the island states, right? What can we help with concretely? Now, of course, talking about private sector and islands brings to our minds just a stream of challenges, right? We've heard some of them already. While we acknowledge all these challenges and the uniqueness of the island context, and also sometimes the differences between an island and the other, where some islands really suffer more than others, I'm not going to talk about the challenges in my presentation today. Rather, I'm going to just emphasize one point, that to create scale, we need to leverage patient and long-term capital, and eventually more private capital. And this is where we come as Get Invest. So frankly, we still see some opportunities despite being scarce and distributed across large areas of land and water and limited economies of scale, but we still see some opportunities beyond also only the electrification sector. So beyond just generating power for electrification. And this, for example, includes the construction sector, where there could be a lot of savings given the high fuel prices in the islands. Agriculture sector as well, generating more food security and productivity, and also income for the farmers that usually spend a lot of money on these diesel pumps that most of the time don't work. And of course, the transportation sector, and that doesn't only include the inland, but also water-based transportation sectors. Boats could become more efficient, all the way to becoming more hybrid, and then eventually becoming fully electric. Now, this slide here is supposed to just show you basically the scale of our impact, just to give you an idea of the program globally as a whole. So this triangle shows that we have received almost 1,000 applications, and 50 of them that we have supported are at financial close, with over €500 million in investments. And this really covers anything from, as I said, renewable energy generation, but also clean cooking, energy efficiency, mobility, and also we are very open to investigating opportunities in the energy storage and green hydrogen space. Now, this is the last slide and probably the most interesting slide for all of you, just to give you a brief flavor of what we have been busy with. And I selected here 2 projects from the Caribbean because I thought most relevant to the audience today. Unfortunately, I won't be able to speak about the projects that we are currently supporting in the Pacific because we started working in the Pacific recently after the Caribbean. So these projects are quite young in our portfolio, and hopefully next year we'll be able to share more information with you. But back to the Caribbean projects, the first one that you see to the left, this is a photo of a PV farm with a little bit of grass and also some sheep that I believe are quite happy. This is a project that's actually very interesting. It's by HDF Energy and their partner, Rubis Caribbean, and they plan to raise over 100 million euros. So yes, this is very large scale, and it's quite large also in our portfolio. The special thing about it is the dual use of land. So they're using the land not only to generate the electricity with the panels, but also for to contribute to the value chain of food value chain by allowing the sheep to graze on the land. And so this dual usage maximizes the outcome of this project on both the energy access, but also the food sectors. What we have been working and supporting the developer is basically, among other things, we've been supporting them to navigate the best practices of how to structure a project where you have dual land use in terms of legalities, etc. We've also have introduced them to some relevant financiers, and the support is actually ongoing as I speak. So this is an ongoing project. The picture in the middle is in St. Vincent. The first one, by the way, in Barbados, maybe I didn't mention that. The picture in the middle is in St. Vincent. This is a very simple solar rooftop project that seeks a total investment of 6 million euro. So it's a bit on a smaller scale. And although it looks like a small project, like a simple project, it's actually quite innovative because all of these solar panels are connected to the power grid. So it's kind of a solar farm, but mounted on the roofs. And of course, the project is benefiting from an ongoing feed-in tariff in St. Vincent and leasing the roofs from the industrial building owners. So these are industrial buildings. The building owners benefit, of course, by a new revenue stream, and it's a win-win for everyone. This is developed by a company called Solife, and we have been working with them again on multiple fronts, including, for example, reworking their business model and reviewing it and validating it, connecting them to relevant financiers and preparing their introductions to those financiers, and of course also walking them through the regulatory discussions that they had with the power utility in St. Vincent. So this is in a nutshell my presentation for today. If I would like to conclude in terms of what really makes us able to support this project or what we see could help generally the sector moving forward, I would say definitely very flexible and patient technical assistance programs that really work with partners. By the way, we don't do these things by ourselves. We also work a lot with partners. And Benjamin, I'm glad that you're here because you're working with your colleagues in the Pacific through GGGI. Partnerships, very important, also with the public sector. We understand that in a lot of the islands, most of the projects are originated within the public sector. So we can definitely work with them towards eventually having a private developer that takes it on in terms of sustainable implementation. And thinking outside the box, trying to find solutions. It's definitely not easy, I agree, but we're here to help. So feel free to reach out to Marie, my colleague, or myself for any questions, and happy to answer your questions online. Thanks.
Thanks, Iham. What a wonderful presentation. Really interesting to hear your take on supporting those that provide finance and those that need finance to really understand each other's perspectives, bringing, public and private sector to the same table. And helping them, understand the language of each other. Your funnel diagram really highlighted how, technical assistance in finance can help unlock resources and support the demand side of finance. I think, with the availability, and we've got to always think about this, with the availability of the global capital and liquidity in markets, which is more than sufficient to reach the sort of trillions needed for climate investment. We really need to be asking these hard questions of why there's hundreds of billions of dollars in low-cost capital remain unaccessed or really underutilized, particularly in islands. And I think programs like yours that are really helping to unlock that and address those barriers. So thanks for your presentation. Great. Well, now we'll hear from the head of the Department of Energy for Greenland, Mr. Rasmus Wendt. Rasmus, over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the team for Island Innovation to set up this Island Finance Forum. I think it's extremely important that we discuss some of the challenges we have, and I sincerely hope that people from some of the larger financial institutions are listening to some of the presentations here. Let me start by sharing my presentation with you guys. It should come up right here. Okay, so Greenland is it's a very different story in many ways compared to what you have heard so far. And I will take you through sort of 4 areas in my short presentation here. I will give you a very short introduction to Greenland. I think that's important to understand some of the challenges we have. Then I will list our 4 main challenges on why it's not easy to be green in Greenland. Then I want to touch upon, I would say, our main advantages when it comes to the green transition. And finally, talk about 3 areas where Greenland needs to work with international investors and the rest of the world in order to overcome some of the challenges we have. But let me start by talking a little bit about Greenland. You probably know it's the world's largest island. It's far up north, but it's when it comes to the size of the population, a very small country. We only live 56 people in Greenland in total, and we are scattered around the entire island with 72 towns and very small settlements. Greenland is also part of the Danish kingdom. It's a former Danish colony and has remained closely attached to Denmark. That means that foreign policy, monetary policy is still decided upon the government of Denmark. Greenland relies heavily upon being subsidized by the Danish government. We receive more than $580 million yearly, and that's approximately 20% of our GNP up here. So while we are in a country in our own, we are still very close connected to Denmark in a number of areas. And that is also important when we talk about finance. That's actually something that is helping Greenland in the green transition. If you look at the map here, you can see some of the renewable energy projects that we have been putting up, but I will come back to that in just a few slides. The main challenges that we are facing in Greenland when we're talking about the green transition is, I would say, first and foremost, that we are having this enormous country with a very small population. And besides that, we are also running what we call island operation. That means that we don't have a single town or a single settlement that is connected to another town or settlement by road or by a transmission line or grid. And that means that we have to set up power plants in each small settlement, in each village. And as you can probably imagine, that's expensive to do, but it also put extra cost on trying to do the green transition. And that brings us to the second challenge here, and that is nature. Most likely you will guess that it can be extremely cold in Greenland. It can also be warm during summer in the southern part of Greenland, but during winter it's very cold. And it also means that if we don't have a backup system that is 100% reliable, it can actually have fatal consequences if people lose heat for 1 or 2 days. We can actually die from that. But it's also difficult in the sense that, for instance, solar panels works extremely well during summer. We will have in the northern part of Greenland 24 hours of sun. But as you then can imagine, during wintertime, there's no sun whatsoever. And even in the areas of Greenland where we will have some sun during daytime, snow will cover the solar panels. We have extreme weather in Greenland. So wind energy or wind turbines can be a challenge. We'll simply have sometimes wind that's so strong that they will break down the wind turbines. So for that reason, that's also difficult to install in many places unless you have very large, I think some of the new technology and some of the very large windmills or wind turbines could perhaps work up here. But that is a very large investment and something we haven't done so far. That brings me to the third sort of challenge we have, and that's something we share with the rest of the islands here. We are a very small economy, meaning that huge investments is difficult to do because we simply don't have the amount of money or resources in our society to do several of these investments here. Some of the investments is simply too big for our economy to handle. And also we don't have a huge workforce, and the workforce is not very mobile. As you might have skilled labor in one part of Greenland, but if you want to build a hydro plant somewhere else, you need to move these 500 people to a new location for several years, and that can also be challenging. And finally, we are heavily depending on hard to decarbonize industries. I should perhaps say that actually when it comes to renewable energy and renewable electricity, I would say, we are actually doing pretty well. We have hydropower plants covering more than 70% of the electricity production in Greenland. So in that sense, we are already on path to complete the green transition, but our problem is these hard to decarbonize industries. And I can try to illustrate that with this graph we have here. It's showing the discharge of CO2 from different industries. And if you look back in 1990, you can see that you have the two blue lines which represent residentials and energy industries. And back then, that was before we introduced hydropower. So the energy industry was pretty high, and all houses in residential areas was relying on oil for their heating. And then, as we have introduced hydropower, we have managed to bring down the energy industry and residential areas as some of the main discharges of CO2. But then we have our fishing fleet, that will be the AFF curve, the orange one, and transport, on the rise. And that is basically sailing, ships sailing from Greenland. And that is one of the areas which is difficult to decarbonize. Then let me then talk about the main advantage we have here. We have a lot of hydropower resources in Greenland. And as I said before, 70% of our electricity is generated from hydropower. And we are extremely competitive when it comes to energy prices compared to other kinds of renewable energy technologies. And actually, as you look at far right on the Greenland hydropower, some of our largest areas which we have not yet developed, which will have to be developed by foreign investors, we will make, we can come up with a very, very low price. Perhaps it's a bit too low, the red line here, but still it will be something around 3 or 4 US cents per kilowatt hour. That brings me to my last slide here. So how do we overcome the green transition here in Greenland? The first thing is it's extremely important for us as a small economy to have access to soft loans for renewable energy projects, but also for energy saving projects. We have so far, we've worked closely with the Danish government, but having access to other sources would be important for Greenland as well. Then having global strong market mechanisms for green shipping and green mining would definitely benefit investments in Greenland in our green transition and utilizing some of the large hydrogen areas that is indicated on the map to the right. And then thirdly, we are going to attract a number of foreign investments into some of our large-scale hydropower projects for export purposes. And that is a process that we are starting up this year here, and we are going to tender 2 very large areas in the beginning of next year. So I think that would be everything from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks so much for that, Rasmus. It really is clearly not that easy to go green in Greenland, despite the name. Some extreme challenges you've highlighted there. Absolutely, barriers and the additional cost of the green transition is completely understandable with those sub-zero temperatures. But fantastic to hear that some of these challenges are not insurmountable. And through innovation and really things like cost competitiveness and energy exports, you're able to overcome those. So without further ado, finally, I'd like to welcome, last but not least, Ms. Vemi Dokun, Environmental Engineer and Island Innovation Ambassador from Mauritius. Vemi, over to you.
Yes, Benjamin, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Is everything okay? So, Mr. James Elmo, CEO of Island Innovations, distinguished delegates, dear participants from islands and partner countries, ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good evening from wherever you are on this planet. So it's a great pleasure for me to be in the midst of the Island Innovators family today. At the very outset, I would like to thank the Island Innovations for inviting me to attend this important event. It is an undeniable fact that climate change is adversely affecting all countries. And I would like to thank the previous speakers, Mr. Thomas and Mr. Al-Talab, for making a very laudable presentation and sharing many of the things that I would have said. So this will make me skip many of the many part of my intervention, and I will try to focus to remain short in this deliberation. So the Republic of Mauritius, for those who don't know about Mauritius, is located 2,000 kilometers of coast of Africa, east coast of Africa, and is considered a seed country. The mainland has a population of 1.29 million inhabitants, extending over an area of 1,800 kilometers square, and it's surrounded by a few outer islands. It also has a maritime exclusive economic zone, which extends over 2.3 million kilometers square. The island is very famous for its beautiful long stretch of white sand beaches and tropical climates. Mauritius was rated as an upper middle income before the COVID-19 pandemic, with a total GDP of 31.7 billion USD and a per capita GDP of $25,000 in 2019. It emerged from an economy dependent on sugar to a diversified economy with the main growth sectors being tourism, information and communication, and the financial and insurance sector. But most analysts forecast that Mauritius is likely to revert to the below high income status post 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, almost every day on the global front, we are witnessing occurrences of extreme weather events and in high intensity and magnitude with serious impacts, particularly on small economies. These events are undermining assets, resources, and efforts invested over decades. The irony remains that the small island developing states have contributed the least to the issues of climate change, and yet, according to the IPCC report, they, along with the LDC countries, are the ones which are most hardly hit by adverse impacts of climate change. It is very unfortunate to note that our planet is on a trend of global temperature rise that will reach around 3.2 degrees, with sub-Saharan Africa experiencing a rise of 5 degrees C. The case of Mauritius, as you have seen in many reports, we are increasingly witnessing the devastating effects of climate change. We are regularly being quoted among the most vulnerable countries on the planet. According to 2018 World Risk Report, we remain the 10th country most exposed to natural hazards. As a matter of fact, we are enduring harsh extreme weather events such as flash floods every year and which are impacting severely on the economy as well as ecosystems and livelihoods. We are living with the looming threats of a Category 5 cyclone, which may hit our island anytime. But I understand that most of our infrastructures are not designed to resist this type of cyclones. With coral bleaching, our natural barrier is getting weakened over the years. We are observing accelerating beach erosion, and although flash flood events are on a rise, the long-term trend analysis reveals that precipitations are meant to reduce by 8% over the last, has reduced by 8% over the last 50 years. So we are to become a water-stressed country by 2025, according to the SIDS numbers report. As many economies of SIDS, Mauritius also sadly relies on fuel-intensive activities such as tourism. And a significant share of our national budget is devoted to oil imports. Ladies and gentlemen, securing climate finance, which is at the heart of building resilience, remains a major barrier. According to the recent study on environment and climate change in Mauritius, commissioned by UNDP, it has been estimated that about 2% of our GDP has been invested every year on environment and climate change issues. To further strengthen its resilience and greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts, government has revamped the National Environment Fund by injecting some $57 million to tackle food management, coastal protection, and disaster risk reduction management. I can say that this provision is far from being adequate as implementation measures. We are only tackling drain works, coastal protection, and these over the 2 to 3 years can amount to $110 million. I believe that the estimated financial implications as spelled out in the Mauritius NDC, which is of the order of $5.5 billion, is a very conservative figure. It is really unfortunate that Mauritius is being required to redirect financial resources which would have been channeled to address key issues such as poverty alleviation and social housing. Post-COVID and with recent increase in oil prices, the situation has worsened to an unprecedented level. Despite that the government announced it coming up with measures such as investing in clean energy, shifting to cleaner and greener Mauritius, mitigating risk of climate change by improving waste management and moving towards circular economy, we still have a long way before we win this battle. Multiple stakeholder consultations are often taking place, and in the budget 2021-2022, the government elaborated its ambition to further increase our renewable share from 40% to 60%. So in this attempt to build resilience, Mauritius is highly appreciative of efforts being made by various donor countries, inter alia, by extending technical support to member states and easing the process of access to finance. For instance, the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub, and it's worth noting that Mauritius proudly hosts the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. This hub has been at the forefront in preparing and developing pipeline projects and strengthening synergies for resource mobilization and multilateral implementing entities. So it has helped enhance capacity to deal with adaptation measures and mitigation measures at country level. Indeed, such mechanisms have helped greatly to strengthen institutional capacity and supported policy development in Mauritius through the deployment of National Advisor on Climate Finance in the Climate Division. The responsible ministries and authorities have been working with academia and with the concerned stakeholders to develop concept notes, facilitating workshops, preparing bankable projects, and listing support of institutions such as Climate Technology Center and African Development Bank and others. But we have to do more. So it's true that we have good advisors on long-term basis at national and regional level within small island state, but what we need is more action. I have no doubt that forums like the Island Finance Forum will continue to play a key role in assisting island state in building greater resilience in the face of looming challenges posed by the climate change. We acknowledge the support of friendly countries such as France, Australia, UK in contributing to operationalization of finance hubs. And we would welcome similar initiatives from other countries. So to conclude, allow me to reiterate the entrenching commitment of our country to work hand in hand with island innovators in the achievement of their various ambitions and the goal for creation of a better world by taking care of effectively global challenge of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bemi. It's really excellent to hear that these challenges aren't insurmountable for Mauritius, particularly after the COVID-19 crisis and the issues facing with faced with income status. Also great to hear that about the enhanced capacity work through the support of our friends at the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub and the brilliant work that they're doing, supporting and embedding advisors in countries. So we'll now open discussions for questions from the audience. Got quite a few really, really great questions in the Q&A box, and we'll go into those in a second. Just so you know, although we're at time, we can go over a few minutes, 10 or so minutes, so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible. So please do stick around, and we can hopefully answer most of the questions that have been upvoted. If I could ask all of our esteemed panelists to please turn your cameras back on so we can see you as we begin the discussions. As I said before, please do share your questions along with your organization and who the question is for in the Q&A box, as well as upvote those that you would like answered as well. So the first question I think that's been the most popular is from Oddgrill. The question is, and I'll open the floor to whomever wants to answer first. How should we support local stakeholders, utilities, government, private sector to develop their capacity to secure investments and to structure investments and secure finance? Who would like to take a stab at that first question?
Perhaps I could start, if it's okay.
Yes, please, Rasmus, go ahead.
I can give it a go.
I think it depends very much upon the kind of investments. For instance, when it comes to utilities here in Greenland, we prefer very much that it's public investments in order to keep prices low and to remain control over the investments. So having access, allowing the government to go out and lend the money would be important. Then some of the larger hydropower potentials we have here, that is not for the government to develop, but that would be for private investors. So that would be a purely commercial investment that we are looking for up here. And then thirdly, I think it's also important that we can allow households to do investments. Isolation, for instance, of the houses in Greenland would be important. But you could perhaps also imagine that some households would invest in small solar panels or even micro wind turbines in other places of the world in order to bring down their utility bills. So I think it depends very much upon the kind of investments. And I think the important aspect here is to set up different schemes in order to overcome these different kinds of investments. Thank you.
Thanks, Rasmus. Iham, over to you. Maybe you could speak to private or institutional investors.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a great answer already. I just want to add something from our experience, because first of all, we as a program, we are demand driven. So we await the projects to come to us, but we do mobilize towards the intake of these projects. And one of the things that I think I alluded to it in my presentation towards the end is really to have flexible and long-term TA support to the project developers, not just fly in, fly out, really work with them through months and months until things materialize. And this is our approach, and be flexible in that support as well. Another thing is building partnerships. For example, in one of the projects that we are working on currently in the Caribbean, we are engaged with GGI in order to facilitate access to GCF financing for the project that we are supporting on another front. So it's true that the pie is small, but still it requires many hands to share the pie. And I think that really adds to the success rate of facilitating access to finance in such difficult environments.
Thanks, Iham. And Vimy, maybe I could pose that same question to you, if you could speak to maybe some of the benefits of the capacity development and technical assistance, particularly when it isn't fly in and fly out.
Yes, very importantly, whenever there is an investment, there need to be that confidence that is built within, for example, if we are investing in solar power, there need to be that the boost of trust. This project is going to succeed, and unless we have such kind of debates, and the country, especially small island states, which have a very fragile economy, they have not much, to invest. So they have to have that confidence, the boost of confidence that they are going towards a project that is going to have a return on investment. And this can be achieved through capacity building and some work with the experts.
Thanks, Vimy. Thanks so much. Honourable Minister Thomas, maybe you could speak to some of the projects that you have, that the country has been working on in particular, and some of the experiences around engaging private sector investment or capacity building.
Okay, I think that as islands, I guess we all think very similarly. So it's not a whole lot more that I can add to it, other than to say we need to understand the infrastructure that is in place. We need to ensure that we all understand, whether it's a government, private sector, or third organizations, exactly what is the end goal, so that we're all singing off the same hymn sheet, if I can put it that way, to ensure that nobody is left behind and everybody completely understands what it is that we're trying to achieve in the long term. So one of the things I weren't able to mention earlier is that we are trying to get to 100% self-sufficiency, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we all continue to work together. That is of utmost importance if it is that we want to ensure that everybody understands our end goal.
Thank you, Minister. And this is another question for you. Thanks, Julie, for the brief overview on St. Helena. In consideration of the ecological and I'm sure cultural richness of the island and the sustainable development agenda, how is ecotourism developing? Is there interest from investors?
So obviously we get some interest all the time. At the moment, when I presented last evening, we talked a lot about COVID-19. St. Helena is in a very unique position whereby we've managed to restrict COVID from entering into the community. But by doing that, we've put in restrictions. So we've had 14-day quarantine, and we're still operating at this time on 10-day quarantine. So that's been quite restrictive to our tourism sector. But there is a lot of interest, and for ecotourism, our marine and our cloud forests and all the environmental aspects of our tourism is definitely taking the lead for St. Helena.
Fantastic, thank you, Julie. I have a couple of other questions here. Firstly, I just want to ask if any of the panelists have any discussion points or questions for the other panelists while I pick another question. Please go ahead. Maybe I'll ask. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry, Benjamin. I just would like to ask to Mrs. Talab about the kind of support that they are ready, because some islands are very remote, and I think accessing to what is your policy? Are you open to go to any part, or is it restricted to some area within your jurisdiction?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically, we operate in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. In the Pacific, it's mostly the members of SPC, the Pacific Community, plus Timor-Leste, and excluding, basically including only the SIDS, the small island developing states. In the Caribbean, we work closely with the CARICOM, so the Caribbean Community and Common Markets group of states. And in terms of, so this is in terms of geography. In terms of the type of supports provided, this really is a wide range of activities that we can help with, including from the beginning, where we can review the business model, verify it, work to update it with the project developer or the company. We can also work with them to define their investment strategy and fundraising capital strategy. We can also work with them to restructure their capital, if that's the case. We can also work with them to, for example, if it's more on selling items like solar home systems or something, or clean cook stoves, we can work with them to revise their unit economics, credit strategy, credit management strategy, all the way to negotiating term sheets with investors. So we actually, once we work on the project for a certain amount of time, where it becomes presentable to financiers, we present it with we recommend the financiers that we believe are relevant for the project to the project developer, and together with them we present it to the financiers. And once there is an intake by the financier, if the financier wants our support to continue during the due diligence, we continue. So we can continue supporting during the due diligence process all the way till financial close. But sometimes, as you know, some financiers, they prefer to do that themselves, so then we exit. Kind of, but I hope that answered your question.
The kind of assistance, for example, risk assessment of projects, is there any kind of support that you provide in that? Right.
So, for example, as part of building their financial model and revising their business model, there will be some risk assessments going on, right? So one thing to clarify, we don't work on the technicalities of a project. So we don't necessarily work on designing a solar farm in terms of the engineering part of things. We only focus on the financial part of things. So anything that is needed from a financial perspective to enable financial close. On the other hand, we do have other facilities that can work with the project developer to provide free advisory support through another consultancy group that we have, to do work on project documentation, like feasibility studies, like resource assessment studies, like, for example, some legal documentation. So that's something that we do. It's on the side, but it's it only comes in once the project is on the path to financial close. We don't just do it we don't do it ad hocly, you know. So the project has to apply, has to be accepted, has to be engaged with us in order to be accepted for a number of financiers. And if during that journey they need, for example, a resource assessment study, we can assess if we are able to support them. And if yes, then we can provide that support as well, free of charge.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think we've got time for one final question. And this question will go again to the Honourable Minister. Recognizing that St. Helena being so remote and having no economies of scale population-wise, have you considered complex systems which combine renewable energy, aquaponics, biointensive farming, and multi-cropping systems that include energy, livestock, forest crops, and traditional crops? Bit of a complicated question, and we don't expect you to answer it all at once. But yeah, any thoughts on that one, Julie?
Okay, so yes, that's very heavy loaded there. As a government, we are constantly in touch with the private sector businesses and the community at large, and we're steadily contributing to the carbon emission reduction by moving away from fossil fuel generated energy to increasing the installation of PV panels to harness solar energy for heating, refrigeration, and other energy requirements. This is obviously positive news, and it will create the impact of reducing customer base for Connect St. Helena. Now, Connect St. Helena is our island utility company, and someone referred to this earlier, I think, whereby when those customers remain and if people come off the grid, this could be subject to an increase in energy costs as a consequence of private sector investment into the PV panels. Therefore, the job that we have, or the task that we have in front of us, is trying to compromise, trying to develop in quick time and get into order people that cannot afford the private PV installation don't become worse off. So that's when you talk about agriculture, obviously we are all trying to reduce the initial costs, those heavy loaded costs like energy, but if it doesn't affect, or if everybody can't benefit from that, then that is the problem that we're faced with. We also, it was mentioned in one of the other forums about the British international investment. And I know somebody mentioned the need, when we're planning to go green, the need for a lot of finances to be made available at the front end so that we can obviously set up the structure, and then obviously it could cost less at the end. That is where we struggle as well, because it's just having access to that type of funding. But here, I guess, because we are always working together with 4,500 people. We try and work together, whether we're from the private sector, from the public sector, etc. But our ambition is to work with the island utility provider to completely remove the diesel imports that currently run our power stations. Before the pandemic hit, we had made good progress with an international supplier to invest in upscaling our renewable energy infrastructure. However, the pandemic changed the economics of that project such that it became unviable. The reality is that we believe that the use of renewables can and should make energy more affordable for the people of St. Helena, and we are actively searching for the solutions to make that a reality. If St. Helena can pave the way for affordable renewable energy, especially given the unique market challenges that we have, the world should be able to easily follow, but it's actually getting the funding to kickstart such projects like that would benefit all sectors.
Thanks for such a well-rounded and comprehensive answer to a very difficult question. And with that, I think we're at time. I'd like to ask each of our esteemed panelists to quickly summarize your vision for going green in islands in a sentence or two. Do we have any takers to go first with that?
I'll go first because then it's easier. If you don't mind, everyone. I think together we can make it more easy.
Perfect.
Yes, I would like to go second. For small island states, we need to be part of the climate deal. The more so we enter the decade of action on climate and sustainable development, COP26 needs to enable an acceleration in the transformation towards a more socially responsible, inclusive financial system, one that serves both people and the planet.
Okay, then I will take over. I think from our side, the most important message here would be that small islands or very small economies face problems similar to some of the least developed countries, as we simply don't have the financial resources to do these investments. And for the international financial institutions, I think it's important to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I've already mentioned this when I did my keynote, so I'll just repeat our vision that we've put in place as a new government, and that is that we are striving for a sustainable environment that creates opportunity and inspires social and economic progress, ensuring a better quality of life for all. It is important, as our first speaker said, that we work together.
Thanks, everyone. And I think that sums it up very well. And I've seen just in the chat, everyone saying thank you, and working together is certainly going to be key if we are going to go green, particularly under some of the difficult situations, but also the opportunities that we have in islands. So thanks, everyone, for the fantastic discussion, your great questions, participation and engagement. While we've heard today some of the challenges in financing the energy transition and meeting SDGs in islands, we've also heard really inspiring examples of what good practice looks like and how to bring people to the table. The success stories that this kind of support can lead to, and what we really need to do to sort of unlock those financial barriers which are still withstanding. So thank you so much to our distinguished guests and honorable panelists. Thank you for your time, for your insights, and a massive thank you to our hosts, Island Innovation, for creating the space for the experts to join us today, and for our panelists and everyone that has attended. Enjoy the rest of the forum and be sure to attend some of the other great discussions. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon, good evening, or good morning.
With your permission, Benjamin, I would like to share Mauritius.
Sure. It's a good picture for us.
You are invited.
Yes, I'll definitely be there very soon. All right.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.